we're live. Speeding around in my chair. It's awesome. Hope everyone's having a good weekend. As you can see, I'm still at West Tech. We gotta be heading home pretty soon though. Get back for the 4th of July, which would be awesome. One of my favorite holidays. I'm a big fireworks guy, so you gotta go do it. You're gonna do it right. You gotta show your kids what's up and how to be all safe and sane, and how to have fun on the 4th of July. So it's awesome. So I've got a lot of testing done today. Some very cool stuff. So here's what's going on. Mark Sanchez helped me last night. We ran a bunch of tests on all. There were 4 different Ford, and I can even move it a little bit. First of all, there's going to be background noise right now. There's a big cooling fan setup. I'll show you guys what I'm talking about. Up there by the drag strip. Whoa, whoa, whoa! Big cooling fans. What happens is there's a big tower over here. See that big black tower over there? That's all of the water for the dyno. Those cooling towers are keeping that water temperature down. So when we do lots and lots of dyno testing, it keeps the water temperature down. So those are going, water's being pumped up through there, through the heat exchangers. The fans are going, making it warm in here. Fans are going, they're going to cool it off and keep a fairly consistent temperature, try to get the temperature down on all the water that's in that container there, in that storage area. So when it gets hot here and it's 9,500 or whatever, that water obviously heats up in the tank, and then so you have less room basically between the temperature that it is and the temperature when it gets too hot to not want to be running on the dyno. So those things will go up and circulate and cool everything off. So that's what you're hearing in the background. I've moved the mic closer to me, so hopefully you guys will be able to hear. Make sure you hit the like button. And so the testing that I did last night and today on the 5-liter, we ran the Ford GT40 intake manifold from Ford Racing, the Yamaha version. We ran the 93 Cobra and Cobra R intake manifold, basically an aluminum version of that GT40, if you will. We ran the SN95 version, the Cobra version, aluminum, cast aluminum, but with the dedicated elbow built in to run the throttle body and assembly that they use on the SN95. And then obviously the one that would be much more readily available today and the least expensive of all of those options would be the Ford Explorer. And so we ran that, and as you can see from the photo in the thumbnail, I ran it with the elbow that comes on it the way that it comes in the Explorer, but also we ran it without that. So if you take a look at a Fox chassis application, the throttle body goes straight out. On the SN95, you've got a dog leg, and then and it's only like maybe a 45 or so. But on the Explorer, you've got that 90. So the question for tonight is, and this will be our poll question, and we're going to get that up early for the early risers, which I like, showing up early like you're supposed to. Did the Explorer elbow hurt the power compared to no elbow? I hurt my elbow. So did the elbow on the Explorer, the 90-degree elbow with the throttle body, hurt the power compared to just mounting the throttle body basically to the intake manifold, so it goes straight out? So let me know what you guys think on the poll. We'll get that up early. So in addition to running those, I also ran an elbow that maybe a lot of you guys haven't seen, but this was an elbow that was designed by the guys at Kenny Bell. And what they did, if you remember back in the day, they had a supercharger kit, a twin screw supercharger kit, non-interpooled, for 5-liter applications for all the Fox chassis stuff. What they did, because the SN95 stuff with the 302 was only for 2 years, they didn't want to redesign a kit to do that. So what they did was they made an elbow adapter to be able to run their supercharger kit for the Fox with this adapter. so that you could run this basically in an SN95 chassis with the SN95 throttle body. And I also ran that elbow because, like he has everything else, Mark Sanchez had one of these elbows, and we were wondering after running, late last night, I wonder what that does. I thought that somebody had also made an elbow like that for applications that had like a GT40 but wanted to run it in an SN95. I thought somebody did that, but I might be remembering this Kenny Miller version. But at any rate, we ran that also, and in fact, we ran it on the Explorer to compare it to the elbow on the Explorer versus not having one, to see if there was any change in power from the change in direction or the size of the orifice or the turn or all that stuff. So we ran all of that. Also, we ran testing on, and you guys have been wanting this for a long time, I ran part throttle versus full throttle. So we ran about 50% throttle, versus 100% throttle. So how many people think, I'm going to put both of them up, how many people think that it made more low-speed power at part throttle than it did at wide open throttle? Maybe that should have been a poll. So I ran that test, and then I did keep the air fuel and the timing the same between both those runs, and I also data logged the map reading to find out how much of a restriction having this thing at 50% throttle was compared to having it at 100% throttle. So that will also be good data. The test that I just finished, but wait, there's more. The test that I just finished, and we're going to walk in and take a look at it. In fact, we can walk in right now and take a look at that. I got to hook up and then we can come back and talk a little bit about what's going on, because that's going to be another video. So I had promised you guys that I was going to look at running I wanted to test the effect of fuel temperature. So what I wanted to run was I wanted to check first, because I had no idea what it was. I wanted to see what the fuel temperature was for a fuel injected motor. It's at, this particular one is at 45 psi. Some of the LS stuff, I'm going to go ahead and turn this off. Some of the LS stuff is up near 60 psi. So I wanted to kind of see what was happening to the fuel temperature. Did that actually raise the temperature of the fuel? We know that there are other things that will do that also, but I wanted to see what the temperature was, and then I wanted to see what happened if we can lower that. So I'll show you. It's a pretty cool thing, though. I'll show you how we lowered it. Take a look at this. So we've got, that's basically the oil cooler. And I'll go ahead and pull that out so you guys can see it. So we've got an oil cooler here, see? Look at that. We've got it in an ice bath that's 32 degrees. So we've got the fuel flowing from the regulator over there. I've got our temperature probe here coming out on its way up to the fuel rail. Here's what I can tell you. It definitely changed the temperature of the fuel. In fact, if you come in right away before it has a chance for the heat surrounding the motor to warm it back up, if you go put your hand on the fuel rail, you can feel that it's cold. It definitely lowered the temperature, and I logged all of that, so we know exactly what the change in temperature is of the fuel. So actually that setup worked very well, and I have to thank Mark Sanchez because he had the oil cooler just laying around. So all I did was just flush it out, make sure that it was good. I actually flushed it with fuel, and then we obviously did pressure tests on it. I mean, we're only running 45 psi, which would be a kind of a normal range for oil pressure. And so it should easily be able to do that, and it was easily able to do that without any problem. Go ahead and get you guys hooked up again. We got a lot of background noise, as I said. So the system worked good, and this has been my original design all along. Is just I wanted more surface area. I wanted something that was convenient, that would fit in a 5-gallon bucket, because that's where the best of everything is. And then that way I could just run over to the store, grab some ice bags, which we have, and cool that off. And what I did to make sure that I was registering my temperatures correctly, because what I have is a Type K thermocouple. I have the Type K thermocouple in an AN fitting, and I have it in an AN fitting going from the outlet of the cooler after a length of line, going from the cooler into the fuel rail. And I did some preliminary tests without the cooler to see what the temperature was, and then the way that I have it set up, I could have it on either side of the cooler, so it doesn't matter. But I did it with no cooler at all, just to see what was happening. And then I also just submerged it in the water in the dyno. I submerged it in the water in the ice bath, and in every instance, it recorded the temperature accurately for what I would think it would be. I mean, it was when we put it in the ice bath, it got down to like 35 degrees or so, 34 degrees. When I had it in the dyno water, which was about 83 or 84 degrees, that's kind of what it was. So it was responding the way that I expected it. It was interesting, and we'll go over some of the results that I found, not all of them, because we'll save some of those for the video. But the interesting thing is the first thing that surprised me a little bit, but maybe a little bit less so after I thought about it, and that's that the temperature of the fuel, even under pressure, was not high. In fact, it was ambient. We're lucky in that, because I measured the temperature of the fuel in our, I think that they have about a 10-gallon tank outside the dyno, and then I measured it in, because the way that we run this fuel injected motor is we have fuel going from the tank over into basically what are carbureted lift pumps kind of, and then they supply fuel up into our surge tank. The surge tank feeds the big Aeromotive EFI fuel system into a regulator. The regulator goes into the rail. It's a deadhead system the way that we run it. So I just checked fuel temperature in all those spots, and it was within 1 or 2 degrees. So that's what the fuel temperature was, and that's where it was basically everywhere, including in the rail, which I thought was very surprising. We've got 45 psi. I know what would happen if we ran 45 pounds of boost. Temperature would be really high, but since we're not compressing the fuel, we're just pressurizing it, which is a different thing. We're not compressing the fuel, so we're not imparting heat into the fuel. So it was just like, I'm just here. I'm okay. And we'll talk about this in the video, but where you heat the fuel up is you have it in a really hot environment. I mean, the underhood temperatures can easily be 200 degrees, and then you're constantly recycling that. It's going back into a gas tank that's coming, you've got heat coming off especially on hot days like this. The surface temperature of the asphalt that you're driving on could easily be 150 degrees. So you have heat everywhere, and all of that is making the fuel hotter. We don't have that in there. We have nice ambient fuel. So you might see an even bigger difference in the fuel temperature than we saw during the test out on the street, which would be cool. And so you might see more of a change than we saw during the dyno test. Naturally, we ran air fuel and timing and all of that stuff. And now, because I've run this with the fuel injection, with the various fuel injected EFI manifolds, the Explorer and the GT40 and the Cobra and the other Cobra, the other Cobra and the other Cobra. Now, since we've run all those, I can now compare that to that same engine run with when we ran it with the carburetor. So we can compare a dual plane intake manifold versus these intake manifolds and figure out, where are the power, what are the power differences, if there are any, and then if there are some, where are those differences, and guys can, bicker back and forth about carburetors and fuel injection. Which one was better, carburation, fuel injection? Everybody can yell about that stuff. But this little 302 has been working very well. It's been a soldier. We've got, I don't know, I'm thinking 70 or 80 pulls on it since I put it up. So, it's been a few. I did change the oil in it, so we want to make sure that we, you know, give it a fighting chance. Like I said, did a lot of data logging. All of that's good stuff. It's been a long time since I ran a fuel injected 5 liter, and a lot of guys wanted to see this with when I did the testing of the E303 from Ford Racing versus Summit's new E303. I got comments about guys, well, yeah, why would you run a carburetor? Nobody runs carburetors, yada, yada, yada. You should have run it with fuel injection. And actually, I think that the fuel injection is going to be kind of limiting on the power gains and differences that we saw. And that will come up in one of the videos. Because let's face it, especially guys that are used to LS stuff, a 65 millimeter throttle body is really not very big. Dark Blaze, what's going on? Boiling fuel is a major problem in drag and drive events like Rocky Mountain Race Week. Are you having boiling fuel from the surrounding temperature? Is that the problem? Well, if so, you'll be happy with the Super Richie fuel cooling, because it definitely makes a difference. I mean, there's nothing better, and I've talked about this before out at Bonneville when we run our 10-gallon cell of ice water on the Turbo B series. We can watch the charge temperature actually go down during the run, which is awesome. And we saw the same thing with the fuel temperature. Fuel temperature is going down during the whole run. Obviously, some of that is the fact that we're getting fuel flow. And I ran successive runs to make sure that we had all the cold fuel going through there. You know, some of it, a little bit of that might be the response rate of the Type K, and us flowing the fuel through and past the sensor and then into the motor. But it's just nice to see less temperature rather than more temperature, because obviously as we make a run, the temperature of the engine, you know, goes up. But not our fuel. Our fuel actually came down, which is pretty cool. So let's see what you guys got going in preparation for the 4th of July. See what's going on with our poll. Did the Explorer elbow hurt the power compared to no elbow? We got 55% saying yes and 45% saying no. So we're still a little bit more split than I thought we would be. Watching this and UFC, so I need to just fight myself, just sock myself. Getaway, what's up? Is there a huge difference between cathedral port and square port LS heads? Yes. The best set of factory cathedral port heads flow 245 or 250 or something, and the best set of rec port heads flow 315. So there's a big difference in the amount of power that either one of those will support. Many of the racers at Rocky Mountain have fuel issues on the drive between the tracks. Why is there fuel heating up so much during the drive? Too large of a fuel pump, too small of a fuel return, fuel pump running on high duty cycle or cavitating. So, but if you have big fuel pumps, which I'm sure these guys do, I'm sure that they also have to have really big regulators with the ability to bypass enough fuel so that they can keep their pressure consistent and still have pressure under wide open throttle, because that's a critical element. You have to have a big enough regulator to bypass that fuel, because if not, if it won't bypass the fuel, you'll build up pressure, and if you start turning it down and down and down, opening the regulator, eventually you get to a point where nothing else happens, because it can't bypass enough to only use a little tiny amount of fuel. So you have to be able to bypass enough where you're using very little fuel while you're cruising around, and it still has to work at 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 horsepower or more, whatever these drag week guys are doing. Have you thought about partially dimpling the elbow? That would be good, huh? And then what I need to do is, when I dimple it, I need to do the correct dimple pattern so I can induce swirl to help it go around the corner. Maybe the heat from the ground, the heat from the car, all of that, and we talked about that a little bit. If this is done during the summer months or when it's hot or humid outside, all of that driving around, you know, like I said, the engine compartment can easily be 200 degrees. You're going to have, you know, if your car is running at 200 degrees, which almost all production cars are, you have 200-degree air coming in there. You have a motor that's running at 200-degree water temperature already, so everything else is hot. You have exhaust that's even hotter. So it's not unusual for it to get very hot. And so the fuel lines also get that hot, which has nothing to do with the pressure of the fuel. It's just the surrounding temperature. Dark, you need to stop putting money out there. I'll answer your questions. Trying to keep my 2-month-old asleep while people practice on their 4th celebration. Yeah, that's kind of hard to do. My son, especially when he's young, but even now, just put him in the car and start driving, and he immediately falls asleep. But not before he takes his socks off. Let's see, I have a set of 4243 cathedral ports. Should I just sell them and get the rec port 823s for a 6-liter? No, maybe. Here's the thing. A properly set of ported 243 heads will make more power than a stock set of rec port heads will. The same thing with aftermarket heads. Like I have video up where we tested trick float 225 heads versus stock rec port heads, and the 225 heads make a lot more power. One thing that will benefit you is a 243 head as a smaller chamber. It will have more compression, so it will want to make more power anyway. The cathedral port is going to want to make more power down low anyway, up to about 4,000 RPM, even if the rec port ultimately makes more power if you ran them stock for stock. But a ported set of 243 heads will make more power if they're done correctly. Dark Blaze, I blew my LN2 cavity up yesterday. The turbo spiked to 40 PSI. 2 rods to the block. That's not good. Time for rear-wheel drive conversion. Yep. I haven't done a big block Chevy yet. My stepfather topped off his 100-gallon diesel tank yesterday morning, parked at Texas sun all day, and lost about a gallon. Yeah, that's the thing. That's what, if you read Mark Donahue's book, The Unfair Advantage, that's one of the things him and Penske came up with. First, they came up with putting the fuel tank up really high, so they had a lot of gravity assist, and then they super cooled it so that they could get the temperature of the fuel down so you could fill more fuel, and obviously it came back up to temperature, but by then you would take it off and run around and burned off a gallon or whatever so that it didn't overflow, and you were still full. So it was a oh, there we go. That's cool. So it was one of the super cool tricky deals so you could stay out longer with more fuel. So Timothy, you got a grudge match coming up? 50302s are getting sparse in the yards. Lots of modular stuff. Really, I see lots of modular stuff in the trucks, but I don't see a lot of modular Ford Mustangs in the ones I've been going to. I do see where we get the 5-liter stuff is not. You don't find them in Mustangs very often there. We've seen a couple, and usually they get stripped out pretty fast. But the Explorer stuff, which is why I wanted to test the Explorer manifold, the Explorer stuff is still pretty easy to find. A Bear in my 73 C20 in California, because why not? We'll see 5 pounds of towing. Oh, 5,000 pounds of towing. You don't want to do a math contest? So the elbow is on the throttle body. No, the throttle body is on the elbow. It's intake. Stupid bug. Oh, the intake, then the elbow, then the throttle body. But they all just bolt on. The throttle body bolts to the elbow bolts to the intake, the upper intake bolts to the bottom, the lower intake. What size is the elbow? The elbow is the same size as the throttle body, which is 65 millimeters. They did it so that, you know, they did it for fitment, so that, because you got to make that turn, because the way that comes out and where it's positioned in the engine compartment, you see that in the Mustangs too, is it you know, if you try to put an elbow on it or whatever, or some kind of air intake on it, it goes right into the shock tower. It's the elbow and 75 millimeter BBK with the Explorer linkage. So did you open up the opening of the intake manifold then too to match the 75? Is something snoring? No, that's one of the, I don't know, the fans of the pumps or something. Would it be beneficial for a turbo sub to use an AC evaporator inside the intercooler to bring down the air temps? Guys have tried that, and it can work. But what is that system? What kind of weight does that system have? Richard, I have a 360 in my 98 Ram, so it's a Magnum. I want a smaller motor that has a higher rev range. Well, you can make that motor rev a lot higher. I don't know how high you want to run it. But whatever motor you get, like let's say you went with a 318. A 318 is not necessarily going to rev any higher. It might make peak power a little bit higher, but it still has very small cylinder heads. It has a very mild cam timing, and it has a very, very long runner intake. All of those things combined to make the motor produce power at a lower engine speed. So basically, it's, you know, designed for torque production, because they want these things to make good power up to 5,000 or 5,500, let's say. They're not designed to rev high, but the mechanical part of the engine, like the bigness or the smallness, is not what's stopping you from running more engine speed. You need more head flow, you need more cam timing, and you need a shorter runner intake manifold to do that. Move that over so I can center myself here, see what's up. I'm saying yes. Who knows? Maybe the elbow creates turbulence or something that's needed. Okay. Richard, I've read people talking about the Vortec 4200 having a vibration issue. That's pretty normal with inline 6-cylinders. And that some guy has been well known for running the 4200 in NHR classes. Yeah, if you go down the rabbit hole on that motor, you'll find that there are guys that have run them in, I think, like stock eliminator or comp eliminator or something, some class, and they're running them at a lot of engine speed. The vibration that you hear is a frequency, and I've been told to rev through it. I don't think dimpling the port is on the elbow is going to do very much. I'm thinking that dimpling would have more of an effect maybe on something that also has fuel to help keep fuel in suspension. Although maybe when Eric did his test, I'm sure that he did an airflow test and it was a dry test, I'm sure. So I don't know. I thought that the golf ball dimpling was from works on a golf ball, because the golf ball is moving through air and it's also rotating. So I just don't know. I haven't seen. I don't think any of the Formula One guys are doing that. Tony, I've read that mechanical integrity wise, that most of revving high safely, like a 302, has mostly connecting rod bolt quality. That's like the Keystone, the past 6,000 RPM. That's not accurate. We can go take a junkyard 4.8 or 5.3 or 6.0 and put a cam and springs in it and run the 7,500, no problem. It will do that pretty easily. And it does it with stock rods and stock bolts. So they were obviously designed with obviously that much strength in there. So you wouldn't need to replace the rod bolts in an LS to do that. The RPM potential, usually what limits RPM in any sort of motor is valve train. That's usually what lets go first. If you don't have the right valve springs and cam, and not just cam with enough duration to want to make power up there, but also the cam design has to impart stability in the valve train. There are stable cams and there are unstable cams. Both of them will rev. One of them won't do it as many times because something will be damaged. So that's why guys spend a lot of time on spintrons finding out, oh, this is inducing bounce or float or harmonics or things. And so there's a real art to getting these things. Like running high RPM, you can make it do that. But getting it to do it a lot of times for endurance racing or something so that it lasts takes a fair bit of work. And it's not the stroke, it's not rod bolt, so that kind of thing. Elbow on the Explorers for the heater box clearance. Okay. That being said, on my Ranger, I put a 45-degree silicone elbow on mine after I installed the BPK. Oh, you got an L33. Those are good. Yeah, Mike, I think the tumbling motion of the ball and the fact that it's moving through air is different. Yeah, I think for the golf ball would be hard for it not to spin. I don't remember seeing anybody do like hit a knuckleball. AFR tried dippling the intake pocket in their chamber years ago. It did nothing, but the reason it didn't do anything because there was no fuel in that part of the chamber. So they put dimples in the part that has no pattern on it, no stain. Have you ever heard of the Holden VN Commodore from Australia? Yes, I have. I mean, I've just read about them. I've never seen one in person. Michael, that was cool that you had a guest last night. Yeah, that was Mark Sanchez. Mark's good people, and he's got a lot of cool Ford story. He's done a lot of cool stuff with Kaufman and just from Advanced Engineering West. He's done a lot of stuff with we talked about Mahovis last night, and with Acufab and Kenny Bell and all that stuff. Gotta stay hydrated. It's hot out. Can you run a test on a centrifugal supercharger and charge pipe size? Smaller equals more boost, more length equals less boost. Kind of like you're testing of the remote mounted turbo. I don't think you'd see less unless we did extreme stuff, because what will happen is it will fill the pipe, and usually the thing that determines the boost buildup is the airflow usage by the motor. So the motor will still use the airflow at the same rate, and the supercharger will still supply it at the same rate. So I think that the only thing that will happen is, and this is probably maybe even not measurable, the amount of time it takes to fill that. But since you're driving around, even if you had a compressor bypass valve, which is blowing the atmosphere, there's still already a bunch of airflow in there anyway. So I don't know that you'd see very much from that. I do a lot of physics for tennis. Oh, that's cool. The tennis ball hairs grip the air and make a huge difference when the ball is new. High pressure above the ball, low below pushes it onto the court. Okay. Richard, your content is always on point. Thank you very much. I'm glad there's a guy like you out there. I'm pulling a motor from a 99 Explorer. Nice. In your yard. Put it in a Fox and put it in a Fox body down the road. That's good. I would put, it already has decent heads. You know, they're not airflow research or trick flow heads, but it has a much better head than an E7TE head that would have come on a 5-liter. So that's good. I would put springs on it. You could put a camshaft in it. And then as we saw, or you will see, the Explorer manifold works pretty well. Throttle body and headers, and you know you're on your way. And I think that the factory throttle body on the Explorer already is a 65. Part of the reason I dimpled my 5-liter elbow was increasing velocity to get water meth into the giant plenum. We shall see. Maybe it will impart some distribution enhancement properties, or I don't know. What is the best 351 Cleveland for street setup? I don't know. What do you mean? Like a stock one or a modified one or cylinder heads? Or I don't know what you mean. Yes, they thought it was fuel wash that kept the chamber clean. It means that nothing's going on over there. But if you do any wet flow testing, you'll find that the fuel goes around the short turn radius, not the long way. It was going to be skidding tennis balls. Yep. So, Derek, you love we're live. Trick flow or CHI or stock 4V heads. Well, the aftermarket ones are going to be better than an iron head. So aluminum would be better already. I've never done a test. I think that the CHI probably could make more power than a trick flow. But again, I've not tested those on a Cleveland. Yeah, if you put the tennis ball fur in your port, then it would look like a Chia port. That's trademark. My dad promised me if I get into Holly tuning, he'll buy me a Terminator X. You should. It's not hard to learn. If I can learn it, even the limit amount that I've learned, anybody can do it. Any tips on tuning pounds an hour fuel maps? I'm having to learn on ECU with early V1 software. If you, the starting point would just be the multiplier to determine power. Are you doing it on? That's probably gonna. Is that gonna be like a VE table? Because that's the big difference between the Holly and the Fast is that the way that you're tuning on a Holly, you're tuning for the VE table. So we're putting most of it at the torque peak, and the numbers like on the Holly are not like that. We have higher numbers as we go up in engine speed. Did you see the 300 with cut and welded 351 heads? I did see that. That's cool. It's on a version 0344. Yeah, I don't know what that is. Richard, how much power have you seen an NA 3-inch stroke stock bore 302 make? I've never tried to make the most power on something like that. So it would be some kind of drag race deal. Maybe I'll dimple my 243 heads. people are always searching for something. I find that interesting that people would spend the time to do stuff like that. There's an awful lot that can be done to the head that's not that we know makes a difference. Unshrouding the valves in the chamber definitely makes a difference. It makes a difference in flow and a difference in power. Bulwark obviously does, proper porting does a lot. The dimpling, if it does anything, it's this much. Yeah, Racer D timing is a good indicator of how efficient the chamber is. I've never seen anything only want 20 degrees of timing, but we have seen stuff be lower than others. I think my grandpa was a machinist, used to somewhat dimple my dad's Pinto heads. Yeah, the dimpling thing I think has been around a long time. Is it true that every 90 degree on the intake plumbing is a loss of boost on a centrifugal type supercharger? It's a loss of flow of anything. If you're trying to flow water through it or air or anything, if you make a turn, you're going to lose something. I've had people quote me these steadfast rules that, oh, every 90 is a half a pound or whatever, but I know that that's not accurate because I've put all kinds of weird turns in, and we don't drop boost the way that people are saying that it does. So there's something else going on. Richard, have you ever thought about running a Ford 6.2? I've never seen one in person that I can remember. I think Admiral wants me to run one of those. Would you ever do a big bang motor where you had the rods or crank cryo treated? The cost of cryo treatment is way less than I thought. But the Big Bang, at least my definition of the Big Bang, was stock stuff. It was stock block, crank, rods, pistons, and then ring gap. And then the other stuff to make power were different things. But it was all high mileage junkyard stuff. Richard, I love your videos. I'm on my college's Formula SAE team. Very cool. Good luck on that. Where we use a sport bike motor with 20 millimeter restrictor. Have you ever thought about doing small displacement dyno pulls? We've only ever done that on we've done some bike stuff on the chassis dyno. And the smallest motor I've run on here is a 1.6 liter. We've run some Honda stuff way back when it used to, when it was a 901, it could spin in either direction. Now the impeller is directional, so we can't do that. At least we can't run the reverse rotation Honda. We could run other small, and they've run some small stuff. I think they ran a Lotus motor for Jay Leno here, if I remember right. But I'm thinking, I can't remember if that was a 1.6 or if it was a 2 liter. And I've run other 2 liter stuff because I ran my Bonneville stuff here too. Turbo turns 360 degrees and doesn't hurt the flow. Yeah. So, Mike, you're thinking that cryo treating them would somehow make them last longer on a big bang motor? The problem with that is that we don't know, like if it breaks and it breaks at less than the other one that we did, or breaks at more than the other one, or the same as the other one, that's not really data. All that it's told us is that it broke. Because the problem with these and this is the problem with all these big bang motors, is we have no idea what condition, whatever the thing that broke, whether it was a rod or a piston, We have no idea that it wasn't our fault from a tuning thing or something. We also have no idea, and I don't think it's that, but that's a possibility, obviously, on every application. But we also don't know what kind of condition the part was in to begin with. Was it already 5% weaker because the guy overheated it 20 times? Was it 10% weaker, 100% weaker, or whatever? Was the, when they forged it, was there a difference? Like, is every one of those things exactly the same in terms of strength and cycle life and reliability and all that? Are they all the same? And if they're not, what is the variance? And then if there is the variance, is whatever you would do to it, polishing the beams, cryoing it, whatever, is that enough to take it outside the range of variance? So if it started on the low side and it went to the high side and broke a little bit later or the same as another one, but it already started low, then that was better. If it climbed way up and lasted to 2,000 horsepower, then we can go, well, yeah, that's a pretty good idea that it did. But if it didn't, if it's still in that range where it's really close, I just, you need to run 100 of them and then take some kind of average and then do it and then run 100 of the other ones and then do that average and go, yeah, it seems like it's, 10% better or whatever. Have a rebuilt power dyne. An old power dyne with a billet fun kit. I don't even know what that is. I know what a power dyne is. I don't know what the fun kit is, though. Jim, can you stroke a 350 without boring it? Yeah, if your block is standard block, there's nothing that says that you have to bore it to put a 383 to put the 375 stroke in it, or other ones. There are other strokes available too. You can actually ship the whole motor and cryo it all bolted together all at once. Cool. Cryo half the rods. Can I just pay like $8 and then just have them cryo the spot that breaks, so all the rest of it will be fine? Maybe I could bring up the topic of giving the Cadillac 500 another chance. Another chance to do what? What was the most catastrophic engine failure? I think the coolest one, the one that looked the coolest on film, was when I was doing that show, the Wheel of Death, and we ran the motor at wide open throttle at 5,000 RPM, and then went out and took the oil drain plug out of it and just let it run out of oil. And then let it sit there and run at wide open throttle with no oil. That one caught fire, or shot fire at least, but it just broke a rod and stuff. Where you normally see small block forward rods break? We don't normally. Normally the block breaks first. I went to a car show on my way home from work and saw a 69 Boss Mustang with a 525 big block running a 500 shot. That's a lot. With a fogger on top of that. Runs at the track a lot. Motor was built 18 years ago. That's a lot of stuff. Small block forward just shears apart in the middle. So you're talking about in the middle of the rod? That's where they break? I'm trying to think. I don't remember breaking a rod on them. I'm sure it's possible. We used to have an engine blow-up competition in Australia. No oil or water, full revs. Fun to watch until the people banned it for being dangerous. Not if you do it the right way and use a boss block. Those are good. The old A4 blocks, the dart block. David, I don't know if a motor plate would help the Ford or not. I wonder if chassis flex with a motor plate would put more stress into the block. Because he used the block stress member to shore up the chassis. But if there's not enough strength in the block, I don't know. The block splits actually up from the main webbing up toward the camshaft. How many have you seen with their own eyes on a small block Ford break in half? I have seen one. I've never broken one on the dyno. I've never seen any 351 Windsors break like that. So your dad's plate just replaced the original small block Ford and Galaxy from a cracked block. I don't think that the early ones had earlier small block Fords didn't have a reputation of that. I think that's exclusive to the late model thin wall, because they were trying to keep the weight down, the thin wall production hydraulic roller blocks. Goes to 11. I don't know if that's a problem with torque or not. It wasn't an issue with the Vortec that I had on mine, but the guys from HP Performance did break one with a turbo, but they were drag racing it also. So what is the mid plate? A mid plate to me means it goes across the middle of the block, and I don't understand how you put it there. Motor plates are usually based off of the front or off of the back of the block. Tony, the girdles will help shore up the mains, but if the thing is going to break going up, the girdle doesn't do anything to stop that. I think an earlier block is heavier and there's more strength to it. Mid plate goes back at the, so what is a rear plate then? Where would that be? Is that still the back of the transmission? Can a small block Chevy be stroked to 400? I don't know. Racer might have something to say about that. Most people don't. They do 383s out of them. Interesting thought. Install a 5-liter rotating assembly in an aftermarket block and boost it past 750 horsepower. Just put the stock stuff in an aftermarket block. There's no such thing as rear plates, man. They're feeling left out. I had a crank brake at number 2 mains, spit out the front. That's going to be problematic. Hold the rods and pistons with it and cut the block in half. Mahovitz did that to one of the aluminum modular blocks on the dyno. The rod broke and just it just almost cut the block in half. I'm a Ford guy, but I'd live to build a 400 stroker small block, big bore block. You're not going to be able to bore a 350 very much. That's the one good thing about the 400 block is it's a 4125 bore. You can't take a 350 out that far. Have you seen a power loss with the gear drive timing set? I've never run a gear drive. I know they've run them here, but I don't remember seeing a direct test on that. Yeah, if you guys are trying to spin up a power dyne, that's the wrong way to go. It was designed as a low flow, low RPM street blower. You know, we ran them 6, 8, whatever, 10 pounds. We've run them that high. But the boost is just a function of whatever you're putting it to. But they were good for back when 5-liter Mustangs were making 225 horsepower. Or even with mods or whatever, they're making 300, and then you put that blower on there, and it could be 400 or maybe 500. But and it's the problem with blowers is that guys didn't want to spin them up all the way. The problem is that's not a 700 or 800 horsepower blower, and guys try to make it that, and it's just not. It's not that. Colton, you need to determine what year your block is, and you need to have it sonic checked. But you could go 30. I've seen guys go more than that, and we've gone 40 before. I don't know if I've ever taken anything 60, but you'd have to measure it and still see if you have enough cylinder thickness. And then also, there's this thing about them wanting to run hot after that. Is there a risk of the Big Bang motor hurting the dyno? Yeah, if it was catastrophic. As soon as one cylinder loses any kind, like if you scuff a piston or whatever, or break a ringland, as soon as one cylinder loses power, especially on a turbo motor, it becomes unhappy immediately and stops wanting to make power. Has anyone seen the flat 4-cylinder VW based engine on YouTube that made 2,000 horsepower at 100 pounds? Man, that's a lot of boost. Boring only a small block Chevy 350 to 357. Yeah, if you can go, I mean, 355 is pretty common, but you can go a little more than that. Anyone ever boosted 366 big block? A little truck motor? My 350 block is bored to break through. That's not good. When you bore it and you reach air, that's not good. And had thick wall sleeves installed. Yeah, if you sleeve the block, that's a different story. And bored back to 4125. Have you seen a guy on YouTube who makes his own engines and makes his own blocks from scratch, welding stuff together? I haven't seen that. 1990 350 block. Is it even worth boring for heads, cam, intake? You don't need to bore it really far. You just need to make sure that the cylinder is clean. It doesn't matter whether it's 4-inch or 4030, maybe 4040. I don't think I'd go any farther than that. But don't try to bore it to make it bigger. Just make it clean and make it work. Because the difference between a 30 over and a 40 over in terms of power is going to be almost nothing. But it could be a lot of other bad things. so I wouldn't worry about that. 331 and 347 strokers are always out of balance. I've never seen as smooth as stock. Maybe you need to check your balancer guy. A 5 liter is a 50-ounce balance. Most all of those strokers are going to be a 28, or even some of them are neutral. I haven't seen Calvin's Big Bang thing that I know of. I saw him break one. He called me and talked to me about it. Cheapest horsepower. Could you save money by if one GT45 is enough installed 2, and if 2 was enough install 3? You want you want to put all those in there? You're supposed to put thoughts on the end of that. I'm going to put P-heads on my 306 build, but got some Edelbrocks. Now I'm worried about the bigger valves. Yeah, Performer RPM head does it have a 194 or does it have a 202? How bad is the Triton V10? I think you spelled the word awesome incorrectly, because that's what you should be asking. How awesome is the V10? So imagine if you, so what do we pick up? 8 or so, 25%? Yeah, so imagine if you improve the head flow of a Triton V8 by 25%. That's what a V10 does. Dodge also has V10s, but the V10 Triton I think is cool just because it's different. Nobody thinks that that's the best motor in the world, or that's going to make 1,000,000 horsepower. That's not why you do it. Because if you go to the Ford LS or Ford Fest, whatever that Holly does, or any kind of Ford meet, you might be the only one there with a V10. Especially if you twin turbo it. Doesn't even have to make any power, it just has to be a turbo V10. The Mustang, a 5-liter Mustang is not 28 ounce. The 1372658, the 5-liter HO is a 50-ounce balance. I have seen the cranks. That doesn't matter. That doesn't scare me. Just like split cranks don't scare me on V8s or whatever. I don't worry about that. I don't worry about the oiling issues of a Cleveland or a Buick. I don't worry about any of that. I put it on there. We show up and see what happens. It's a much better way to go about it. I've never run an 8-liter Ram V10. David, this is going to be a complex question. Do stock NPI 4.6 pistons have any piston to valve clearance with aftermarket PI cams when using PI heads? Yes, they will. You will run into you have to measure all of that. If you're putting cams in any Mustang, regardless of what the combination is, you have to measure piston to valve clearance. And the low lift cam doesn't really do much. What you're looking at really is duration. The lift is almost not an issue because where the valve is at maximum lift, you're not at your interference point for that. The interference point is going to be plus or minus 10 degrees, and peak lift hasn't occurred there. So the lift is almost irrelevant. You could run 700 or 800 or 900 lift. Richard, how would you run exhaust plumbing if you had to run 3 GT45 turbos on? You just merge them all together. You'd merge them all together and go out into. You could go from 3 into 2. You could go from 2 into common log, which is what I want to run 8 of them, not GT45s, but 8 turbos. But I want them fed by all of the banks. I don't want to do individual ones. That's more of a logistic nightmare. I want to do, I'm going to feed them. My plan is to feed them up into a common log going all the way across, which I can then stack the turbos on because they'll have a bunch of flanges to mount the turbos on, and they'll be V-bands. So I can just cap them. So I can run 1 or 2. I'll probably start off with 2, run 2, and then the exhaust will be merged together. The discharges into the intercooler will all be merged together. So there'll be 1 intercooler, there'll be 1 common exhaust. You don't have to worry about an individual pipe feeding an individual turbo because all of it's going. And then because of the modularity of that design, I can just, okay, let's try 3. Now let's try 4 and 5 and go all the way up to 8 because it's a V8 only. You know, if we had a V10, then we would do 10 of them. Is there an aluminum block V10? I don't know. Have you run Ignite race fuel? I think that they've had Ignite over here, but I think that the Ignite that they had might have been some kind of race E85 or something. I have seen Boosted Lifestyles 10 or 8-cylinder. I had talked to him. Yeah, that's a really cool deal. It was a really cool deal. It was a lot of work though. He struggled with getting all the wastegates working and stuff. Does anybody here know? So this is a good time to ask because there's lots of people here. Let's see how our poll is doing because it's almost time to go. I got lots of work to do. Did the Explorer elbow hurt the power compared to no elbow? 60% saying yes. We're going to end our poll right there, and you 60% are correct because it did hurt power, not by a lot, but by some. Does anybody know what the crank trigger pattern is on the Northstar, like a 98 or 99? I have one of those. Sanchez has one of those. I want to run it on the dyno. I have the bell housing to hook it up. Obviously, motor mounts are not a problem. It has a water pump on the back, so we don't have to worry about that. But I need to know what the crank trigger is because I need to know if we need to or if we need to mount a trigger wheel on here so that we can. I'd like to run it with a Holly just so I can do the tuning on it. And the other thing that's awesome is when Mark took this thing out, when they took the one, what he did was dropped a whole cradle with the engine and trans because the trans was bad in the unit that he had. So he just swapped the whole thing. So that left him with a bad trans and a good motor. The motor was still running good. So what I want to do is take that motor, and when he took it out, he kept the exhaust. And if you know anything about the Northstar engine in a front-wheel drive, the way that they have it, they do the exhaust in this kind of a similar manner to the 3800. So they have one exhaust manifold on one side that runs under the motor and then comes out next to the other exhaust manifold that's on the backside, and then they merge together in a Y. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? You should be, because they merge together into a single exhaust. The only thing that it's missing is a flange for a turbo. And so that will be, I think that will be an easy deal. It wants to be turbocharged. So then I will have to do, we just got to strip all of there's a lot of stuff on there. I got to strip all that stuff off and then put bigger injectors on it. And if we can get the ECU working and have it, even if we're just going to run it batch, I just need a crank trigger. Or if the cam sensor works, we'll drive it off the cam sensor. Whatever, just give me some kind of signal. Give me something to work with here. A 4 pulse or a 1 or whatever it is. Give me something to work with, and then we can run the Northstar because it's there. It's just sitting there, just begging for boost. The Viper V10 is an aluminum block. That's right. .28 ounce should rev up quicker. No, that's not accurate. It's not a less weight, more rev thing. That's not how it works. You know, it would make a turbo install even easier. A V-band turbo housing, that would work. But I like, oh, well, we could rotate the turbo anyway. That would be better, but I'm gonna weld a V-band onto the exhaust coming out of that from the motor, from the exhaust manifolds. And then I'm going to bolt on the elbow that I have, because the elbow has a V-band on one side and then a turbo mount on the other. And it also has a provision for a wastegate. So it's all just, it's modular and ready to accept. Justin, you have a 19 SS Camaro. So that's going to be an LT base motor, right? Hook up a PS scope to the crank sensor. So nobody knows what the Northstar is? Did I not get any Northstar answers yet? Slayer, finally fired up my XE268, 10-to-1 compression, Vortec head, LS springs, cam braking went great, nice. Yeah, most of the Fords were 28 ounces, most of the previous ones. The 5 liter was the 50. And I think that the 5 liters on the trucks were not 50s. I think that those were also 28s, if I remember right. I posted a PDF of the pattern. It's really weird. We were looking at it last night. I was looking at it at Sanchez's, and it looked like it has 4 groups of triggers. We don't know if the spacing in between is the same, because otherwise I was thinking, look, we'll just take the leading off of the first 4 and trigger it that way, and that would work. But we'd have to file the other ones. I don't want to take the motor apart, so I'm not going to do that. I want to run it if I have to make a mount or whatever to mount a trigger wheel. That's not a problem. How's the Australian Barra build? I haven't done anything to it. All I've done is taken one apart. No, I haven't done American Ninja Warrior for a long time, only because of the time involved. The last time I waited in line at Venice Beach, it was 8 days, and I don't want to be away from my family for that long, and I don't want to be sleeping out in a tent. And the one before that was in Denver, and that was 3 or 4 days, and that was really cold. Everywhere else in the country was like 80 degrees. In Denver, it was snowing. you prefer tri-Y headers or long tube headers? Well, a tri-Y is a long tube header, so a tri-Y or a 4-into-1. I think you could get them to both do the same thing, especially for these kinds of street motors that we were talking about. Yeah, it was 8 days was a long time. Although, like I said, Venice Beach was much nicer than, because it was nice during the day and we were on the beach, and it was just better than, than being in Denver. I've never done anything with an electric supercharger. Yeah, they should. Every engine should have the same trigger pattern. That would make life a lot easier. 1 more minute, and I've got to get back to work. Yeah, I think it's been proven that a Barra is a 6-cylinder has lots and lots of potential. Mac wanted to give you a shout out, Richard. You always have great conversations. Thank you. Humble personality. Just talk to us like you're my friend. That's right. It's my boys. What's your favorite odd or not common small book Chevy? The thing that I want to do, that I need to do, because I promised that I would and I will, is I want to combine the LT1 and the L99 and make a Gen 2 302. That's good, Casey. Speed limit 45, Denver 7. I don't know if you've heard of them. The TB48DE is a Nissan Inline 6, popular in the Middle East. I'm not familiar with that. That's not the, no, that's not the turbo diesel or the diesel one, right? Six cylinders, 4 cylinders, rotaries, V8s, 10s. Although I haven't run a V10 on the engine dyno, I need to run a Triton because we have bell housings for the modular stuff, so it should go on there. I need to run a V10. I need a V10 in my life. Oh, a 4.8 liter 6 cylinder. That is big. Is that a 283 crank and a 350 block? It's a 3-inch stroke crank, that L99. The L99 has is 4.3 liters, so it's a 265. Yeah, it's a 265. Any plans for a 14 GT 500 5.8? I've already run some of those on the engine dyno and we did Kenny Bell swaps on them and made power with those. I think a Holly will run a V10. I think we looked at that. Who's going to get the last question? Come on, go. I'm glad the fans went off. I'd like to see a 4.9 turbo. The 3-cylinder Sprint, it definitely needs to be done.
You did see a test of common 90s build V current tech, small block in Cleveland's. We don't, Jody, we don't, Cleveland's wouldn't be 90s tech for us. They would be 70s tech because nothing else was, there were no other Clevelands. We only had Clevelands in the 70s here in the United States. And I don't remember when the last 400 or 351M was, because that's technically a Cleveland headed motor too. But I think that those stopped before the 80s, though, if I remember right. I did do the Pontiac testing. Those videos are going to be coming out. I just haven't taken the time to put together a video while I've been down here testing and doing live feeds with my boys. Okay, guys, I got to get going. Thank you all for showing up. I'm going to run my clip over here. Yeah, what's up? Thank you, guys. I will see you all tomorrow.